Helen Glover will be known to many of you, as you showed yesterday by raising your hands. So I do encourage you to have a look at her list of relevant publications. Would you welcome Helen to the stage, please?
Good morning, everyone. Oh, gosh. It's always, you take the temperature of a room and you kind of start with good morning. It tells you how the rest is going to go. Could you help me try that again? Good morning, everyone. Oh, fantastic. Thank you. It's a great privilege to be here, and I want to acknowledge the Aboriginal community of Tasmania and its elders past and present, and thank them for the wisdom and the knowledge that they've contributed to the thinking around recovery. And Indigenous populations around the world have had lots to offer us around this thinking. I also want to acknowledge the people with the lived experience who have struggled and triumphed over the impacts of mental illness, and that knowledge informs deeply about what I want to talk to us about today, to help us to refocus and never take our eyes off what people are actually saying helps and doesn't help them in their ability to overcome. I think sometimes in the kind of business of worlds and our programs and the way that we go about our work, we can kind of lose that centre of thinking about why we're here. What is the reason we come to work? Keynotes are a little bit anxiety-provoking, and I'm not sure you'll find any keynote presenter that doesn't that sleeps well the night before, because I surely don't, and I know other keynote speakers here kind of spend that night going, oh my gosh, how am I going to present this? And it is, as Anne said yesterday, it is a stretch to step into this space. And so for the last few weeks, I've been thinking about what are the ideas that I want to stretch into here that maybe I haven't articulated before. I want to ask us all to stretch here, whether we're someone with a lived experience, whether we're a family member, whether we're a service provider, or even whether we have something to think about organisational policy, organisational design, and even higher than that into system design at a higher level. One of my personal stretches that I do is that, yes, I have a lived experience, but I also am professionally trained, so I have that disability as well, that we've been taught to our language, and we've been taught a way of seeing the world that probably is quite narrow. And in my travels, I get an opportunity to speak with people in different places, but the one that I value, and I use it as a bit of a trampoline, a bit of a practice ground for myself, is in a plane. And I spend a lot of time, last night, Frank and David and I were kind of woeing about the thing about flying so much. But one of the things that I use in a plane is I get to speak to someone who's sitting next to me, and I intentionally stretch myself to dare to have a conversation with a stranger. And this is about practicing a language of curiosity. And also, sitting next to a plane, next to a stranger, is a great way to practice, because they can't run away from you. They can't make excuses. They can't go, I'll be back later, and just leave you hanging. You know, they're trapped with you for as long as you want to kind of keep practicing. And I've been blessed with some of the most amazing conversations, and realising that we are connected not just by 6 degrees, I think by 1 degree. If we dare to hold that space and be curious enough, we find connections. You get off a plane, you're giving a man a hug that you've spent the last 2 hours on a flight from Melbourne to Brisbane, and your husband's standing there with a bunch of roses, and you kind of go, he's going, who's that guy? And you've just had this really interesting conversation around that. I want to share a couple of conversations that I've had in the last few weeks that kind of weave into this stretch a little bit for me. Is that okay to share a bit of stories? So it seems that the Melbourne flight's been a popular one lately, and it was a Friday night. It was late. It was about 2 hours late, this flight, so it was about 9:30 p.m. by the time I got on this plane back to Brisbane. And, I was already grumpy. Friday night, you're at home with your friends and family, and we're still going in a kind of bus in the sky. So I get in, I sit next to sit down, and this guy next to me, before I'd even unpacked and put things away, the guy goes, "Hi, my name's Gary. I'm a high net worth individual. What do you do for a job?" And I'm going, oh my gosh, I've got the wrong, and I'm looking around at the air, can I sit somewhere else? And so I sit down and I say, "Hi, my name's Helen. I'm a loser on a Friday night waiting for a delayed flight into Brisbane." And then I thought, oh, I don't want to talk tonight. I don't want to be curious, especially to Gary, as he's handing over his business card. And then I thought, I'm having a little talk to myself, saying, "Helen, be curious. Come on, stretch a little. Just because you've already made an assumption about him, at least check out that your assumption is right." So I said to him, "And what does one do to be a high net worth individual?" And he goes, "Oh, I work in health." And I thought, oh gosh, this is even going south at a real rate of knots. And I said, "I don't meet many high net worth individuals who work in health. The people I work wouldn't describe." Anyone here? I may be wrong. Maybe it's just me that's not. Yeah, I thought we were about all the same. Anyway, he said, "Oh, I'm a computer scientist." I go, "Okay, yeah, keep going. How does that connect to health?" And he said, "Well, I've worked out this computer program that's going to save aged care." And he said, "This computer program is so good." He said, "We don't have to employ people with any skill, or we can just hire anyone. Because when an old person falls over, up comes a screen that says, fill out this form, this form, this form, say this, do that, go and tell this person, followed by that. We've got the whole care pathway mapped out for them. There's nothing anyone else has to do." And I'm in my heart going, "Oh, please do not get old, Helen." And I just said, wow. I'm wondering when you get to that age, whether someone will actually want to see you and have a conversation with you, or whether you're going to have a computer program that tells you what to say and what to do. So my heart kind of died, thinking, wow, is this where our health... And I remember what Anne was saying yesterday, it was probably a very technical fix for an adaptive challenge. And then trying to be a bit kind of, connected to this guy, I said to Gary, I said, "So where's your market in Australia? Is it? Where in Australia is taking this computer program on? Note to self, do not go to that aged care facility." But he said, "Oh, no, Australia's not our market." He said, "It's not big enough." He said, "China. One facility in China is 10,000 beds." I said, "You mean 10,000 people?" He said, "Oh, yeah, that," he said. "But 10,000, we're counting beds." So I thought that was a long flight, a few drinks that night. Next Friday night, so I've already got this thought about, and frequent flyers, we like the same seat, we're creatures of habit. And so you're in the same seat, and next to me is this other guy, and I've already got this assumption. I've looked at him, I've already made a picture about him that I'm not having a conversation with you because the last guy sitting in that seat wasn't good. And this guy's done up in a really fine suit, and he gave me this sense that he wasn't easy to connect to. He was saying to the air hostess, "Could you get me something from my bag, please?" I go, oh gosh, this is going to be another long flight. Could I have someone that's interesting to talk to practice my conversations with? So I'd already checked out. I'd already decided that this was not going to be a conversation I was going to engage in. So I was in my jeans and I looked kind of like I do in my jeans. And I'd kind of stolen a magazine from the Qantas Club where they tell you do not take, but who's going to miss one? And I got out the woman, it was a new idea, I'm sitting there, and he's got his highbrow kind of iPad going, and I've got my new idea flipping there. Kind of chalk and cheese. Anyway, I put the new idea down, and I got out Heitfitz, Adaptive Leadership book that Anne was talking about yesterday, and I thought, I'll get into Heitfitz a bit, and I'm starting to read Heitfitz a bit, and this man looks at me, Tim's his name, and he said, "I see you know my friend Mr. Heitfitz." I've gone, oh gosh. So my assumption started to change that he even knew the author. He said, "Oh yes, when he comes to Australia, I know him well," and he started to bring out photos of him. I'm going, "Oh, cool." And so he started to talk to me about, I've got to be curious. I said, yes, I am interested in this world. He said, "Oh, yes, wicked problems are so great, aren't they?" So he gave me a 2.5-hour tutorial around, the who's who about adaptive change and adaptive leadership. And he's just, really engaging with me around this. I'm trying to, wow, this is really great. And I'm kind of chipping at myself, saying I'd already made assumptions to check out of this conversation. Anyway, we could go down that track, but I won't. But he asked me a really important question. He said, if I gave you 2 sentences to tell me what you do, because at this point I hadn't said anything, what would you say if you only had 2 sentences? And I thought about this and I thought, what do I do? And I said, I see my work as working with organisations who want to stretch themselves, who want to challenge themselves to be the best, so that they can create and foster opportunities for people who experience mental illness to thrive. And he looked at me and he said, "Wow." He said, "That's a very bespoke niche." He said, "But what I hear in that conversation, in the way that you said that, you didn't describe what you do, you described a relationship that you have." I thought, "Oh, God, I got a tick for that one." But then he got curious with me. Instead of me getting curious with... no one's ever got curious first back this way. It's always me the other way. The table was being turned and I was feeling it. And he said to me, "What makes this... Why this? Why this area?" And so I started to tell him a story about, well, once I was on the receiving ends of services. Once I was locked up. Once I was given away as never to recover. He dropped his drink at that stage. And he said, "What do you mean you were locked up?" And I said, "Well, 20 odd years ago, people told my family, my husband was told to divorce me because they thought that I was going to stay in an institution for the rest of my life." And he said, I don't get it. Where have you learnt this stuff about helping organisations to be at their best?" And I said, "I've learnt it from being an observer of systems, of receiving systems that haven't worked well. And by watching that and thinking about there must be a different way." And when I told him about this, when I got into service, and I imagine there are people here too, that I thought that free recovery, I thought a system was going to recover me. Yeah? I'd signed up to that. I love this. These are signs I took in the UK many years ago, and because the recovery services over there are like our car rescue, RACQ. What do you call it down here, Taz? What do you call it? RACT. So RACQ. So they're like that. So you're driving along and you think, "Oh, great! I don't have to worry about anything. I've got a service that's going to come. I don't have to put petrol in the car." And this is what I thought mental health services in my life were about. Anyone else joining me about that? That's what you thought? Yeah? Oh, yeah, I'm a slow learner, aren't I? And then you drive a little bit further down the M6 and you see this sign. Oops. It suddenly got whipped away. And I think we're hearing some stuff around the policy stuff about what happens when they're pulled away. Because then, but don't worry, even when they're pulled away, we'll still leave this one in case of breakdown. Stay with vehicle and await free recovery. And this is my thinking for many, many years about what a role of a service was to do in my life. And I'm thinking that still today, many services are still setting themselves up with the shingle out the front. Now I'm seeing shaking heads going, "Yep," with "Come to us, we will recover you, we are a free recovery service, just come in and sit down." The trouble with that is that you end up with something like this as an image. Yeah? And this is where I kind of saw myself, and I was getting, kind of this sense that this was the best I could get. Yes, I was being fed, and yes, I had kind of been looked after, but this wasn't living. There was a worker at that time in my life that dared to challenge me. Wasn't comfortable, probably put me into that kind of height-fit zone of disequilibrium if I had the language back then, but probably a very useful language, useful challenge. When we don't challenge, when we don't stretch, when we don't see beyond that this is a permanent state, we won't be even bothered to kind of see that there's a reason to be curious with someone. This worker said to me one day, in this position that I was, she said, "Helen, how many days a year do you have symptoms?" Now, from that position, of course I said 365 days, and don't forget the quarter, because I was living it. I had every conversation was illness saturated. Everyone was monitoring. Every relationship I had in my life, except for my husband, bless him, was something to do with an illness. So by fact of the environment, and by fact of the relationships, and by fact of the conversations, I could not but take on the identity and the message that symptoms were present 365 days in a quarter. This worker stretched even more, because that could have seemed like a monitoring exercise. She stretched even further and she said, "Wow, I imagine with all us in your life and people kind of trying to organise you and manage you and monitor you and do all this stuff, it must feel like that." So she joined me. She kind of connected to, yeah. But then she said, "I imagine that it must feel like that, but I don't think that's possible to hold that distress 365 days in a quarter. It's not possible. There will be waxes and wanes in that if we notice it closely, if we watch it closely." And she invited me, she said, "How about between now and when we meet next, that you think about this question about how many days a year do you think you'd have active symptoms to the point that you could do nothing, to the point that I'd get an NDIS package?" That was an interesting question. She didn't say the NDIS package, she's going back a few years. And I liked this worker because she saw me. I didn't get a sense that she was trying to manage me. I got a sense that she was trying to invite me into something I didn't really know what that world was. And so I went away and I thought about it. And it was a really challenging question. And I went back and I looked at all the days in the previous 12 months. I looked at hospital and I had a bit of an aha. Even the times that I was in hospital, I came to this kind of uneasy recognition that even some of those days I wasn't unwell to the point that it would have stopped me. I was just waiting for the doctors to come to the same conclusion that I was. And even the days when I kind of thought I couldn't go and do something, they probably weren't to that point. So that particular year, anyone want to have a guess? Out of 365 and a quarter? No? I worked out 45 days. Now, the maths on that is 320 and a quarter. You would think, wow, I've got all this. I felt angry. Those days are gone. You cannot get them back. You multiply that by 20 years. 6,405 wasted days. And when I share this with people who've been in similar places, they say the same. So our reason to be in people's lives is not to waste one more day. To make sure that the reason that we're in someone's life is that they can get spectacularly good at mastering the things that are difficult for them, that are challenging for them. So Tim was hearing this stuff. Tim was a guy in seat 1A. He was hearing this stuff, and he asked me one more question. He said, as a consultant working with the organisations that want to stretch themselves and challenge themselves, what are you noticing that's different between those that do and those that don't? I think it comes down to one basic thing, that those organisations that want to stretch themselves, they're willing to challenge the core belief about why they exist and what their programs are centred around. And I usually start with an inquiry, and I'm going to ask you these yourself, a little bit interactive here. The experience of significant mental health is ultimately, you've got a choice. I'm going to give you a binary choice here. I'm going to ask you to lean to one side or the other. It's either to be considered life-enabling and transforming, or life-defeating. 5 seconds thinking time. 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's make our choice. Those who think it is life-defeating. I think you think that. You don't want to tell me that bit. So everyone is saying it's life-enabling and transforming. Can I see some hands? Yeah? No one is saying it's life-defeating? Yeah, thank you. Yeah? Yeah, I'm asking you to pull. I know people want that middle ground. I want a bit of both. It's safe and warm and fuzzy here. It gets you splinters if you sit on the fence. But we will be pulled one way or the other. This is what I'm asking you, so what do you think? Whatever you think, you'll be right. So if you think that the experience is life-defeating, we'll create the environment to make that a truth. If we think the experience is life-transforming and enabling, we'll create the environment to show us that we're right. Is that true? Yeah? So let's test this one more. I want you to think about what is the core focus in providing services to people who experience mental illness at the moment. Think outside your own service, think wider, lift our eyes, and think about, in this country, what are services set up to do? Once again, I'm going to give you a binary choice. We can foster opportunities for people to self-determine, self-manage, reclaim a life beyond adversity and beyond services. Oh, interesting. Or are we set up to ensure people are kept safe, safe, comfortable, well looked after and cared for? Wow. Wow. Can you feel the pull? There's a little bit of a hint here. The colours. Life-defeating, life-enabling. It transforms into here. If you were receiving a service, I imagine the one that's going to give you energy, the one that you want to say, at least there's an opportunity for me to step. Who would like to go to a life-defeating service that just keeps you safe, well looked after, comfortable and cared for? One person in the room. What does that say? And yet, most of you put your hand up that that's what we're delivering. We have enough evidence from people who have struggled and triumphed over the impacts of mental illness to suggest that we understand what it takes to get your life back. It's hard yakka. It's not going to come by the vehicle of being kept safe, cared for, well looked after, comfortable. I was working with an organisation in Queensland, and they were a youth service, and they pulled themselves to this side. They said, but this is what we're funded to do. And it's always the safe word that pulls people to this side. That side doesn't say it's not safe, but people assume safety is our first, we've got to do safe. Everything after that's an optional extra. So this group was almost throwing rocks at me when they were standing here, but, our job, we have a mandate. We're funded to keep people safe. The only mandated model of care that I know for the Blue Service, and even then I'm not sure that it's that mandated, would be palliative care. And so to this group of workers, I said, so you're saying for 14, 15, 16-year-old kids, the best that they can hope for is a palliative care service? And then those of us that are thinking we're still being seduced into creating environments over on this side, on the blue side, is that what we're saying for people with mental illness, that the best we can hope for is a palliative care environment? So we've got very used to providing a safety net as the core centre of our service frameworks. A safety net will entrap me. I will still get, looked after. I don't even know that I'll be that comfortable in this one, but I'll get looked after. It'll catch parts of me, but parts of me will fall in. If you think about a safety net, there are big holes in that to fall in. We can't do much once we've caught in it. Huh? If we start from this position, it's very hard to get to the green space. Very hard indeed. Many people think, first we'll provide the safety net, and then we'll use it as a catapult to get people out of there. It comes back to the safety net again. The challenge of this is that we try to empower people from the safety net. Once we've created the safety net, once we've wrapped people up in bubble wrap, once we've invited them to lose sight of a life. What was that thing you said, David? Are you living the life you want? Very hard to connect to the life I want when I'm in a safety net. I've lost sight of it. How many of us, who've not heard my spiel about this word, how many of us think that our role as service providers is to empower people? Can I see? Oh, that's interesting. How many think it's not? And the undecided people sitting on the fence, yeah? Yeah, so this is interesting. Even in this conversation, if we're not having this conversation with our colleagues, with each other, we think we're all working from the same structure. But there's half of you that think our job is to empower, and half of it that thinks it's not. That's really interesting. I wonder how we see the world differently. As a social worker, I should be rah, rah, rah empowerment, but I'm not. Because the act of empowerment, thinking that I can empower someone else, I can give you a bit of my power, is an act of disempowerment. I can only disempower someone. I can't empower them. And sometimes my actions may get in the way of someone exercising their own power. So I was playing with this when I was writing an article in English this time, Andrew, not Norwegian, but I was writing an article and I was playing with this word, empowerment, and I simply took the EM away and turned it back as me power. You like it? Ultimately, what we're trying to foster opportunities for is for people to exercise their me power. It's already there. It's an internal process. We're born with it. But along the way, it's been atrophied, usually by people trying to empower us. And I'm not sure whether, if I played with this a little bit more in my brain, is if we flip the M, it could be we power, a collective. I had that on another slide, but I don't think it's on this one. So ultimately, I'm going to come back to a plane conversation, and can people remember in March there was that disaster in the flight going into Dusseldorf for the Germanwings plane? Yeah? So I was on another flight, and I think it was into Melbourne, 24 hours after that. And we were just about to land, probably 40 metres off the ground, and you do this little ready to brace sort of thing, and we're coming in, and all of a sudden, every engine roared into action. And this plane went and it started to go upwards like this. And I go, it's a whole plane goes an intake of breath going, and the girl next to me, she grabbed me. And I said, it's okay, it's okay. Qantas's motto is safety before schedule. Thinking, and I'm looking at the air stewards buckled in front of me and they've gone white. I look at the landing card, never read the landing card, but this particular day I did, and it said Boeing, and I thought, it's okay, it's Boeing, because the frequent flyers know if it's not Boeing, we're not going. So I thought, we're okay. So this engine roared up, and I'm going, oh, if this is the last day on this planet, then that's okay. And after about 10 minutes, no one spoke. Everyone's just holding on. And after about 10 minutes, the plane levelled out. And the captain came on the, whatever you call it, the radio, whatever. And he said, wow, that was a bit interesting, wasn't it? And he said, the plane, we were cleared for landing, but the plane in front of us was still on the landing, on the tarmac, so we thought it was best to pull out. I thought, thank you, pull out, that's great. Anyway, it took us about another 15 minutes to come back around and land. So we're standing there, ready to get off the plane, and this first officer, white shirt, kind of looking like a first officer should, girls, standing there, and he's got this big grin on his face, and he goes, and I said to him, were you responsible for that? And he goes, yeah, wasn't it great? I've only ever done that in a simulator before. I've only ever done it in a simulator. And I said, thank you for all your hours and hours and hours of practice in a simulator. And he said, now I know I can do it for real. He was exercising me power. He was on fire. He was like, yeah. And then the other cynical frequent flyer behind me said, yeah, mate, but think about all the paperwork you've got to do now for that little incident. And this first officer goes, I don't care. I want to do it again. So he left with this experience about IROC. He said, I know I can do this. I know I can get myself out of sticky situations. Ultimately, that's what recovery is about, getting myself out of sticky situations. When I'm in the safety net, I don't know how to get out of sticky situations. When I'm in the trampoline, I use it to get myself out of sticky situations. I know how to use it to bounce. I know how to use it to get my me power. This is what services need to stretch from creating safety nets into trampolines. Now, what I hear around the countryside is that instead of calling it a trampoline, we abandon people thinking that we've created an opportunity, but we've actually just gone squash and we've not provided anything for someone to use as a springboard. If we go back to the trampoline, a trampoline is tightly woven. It's got a lot of consideration. It's got a lot of thinking in it. It's got a lot of taught in it that someone can use it. I can't use this as a springboard. I'll go splat. And my fear is that when we think about services and what we provide, are we providing someone to get spectacularly good at getting out of sticky situations? So a couple of years ago, I was in Central Australia, and I was working with a service who asked me to do a workshop with some of the people that come to their services about finding their voice, finding their self-determination, their me power. Now, I'd been at this service about 5 years before that, and I'd met some of these guys previously, same guys, same place, coming 5 days a week. And, you know, they had the pool table, they had the couch, they had the... And the workers were saying, oh, we want to get them out and doing something. I'm saying, but you've actually set the environment and they're using it perfectly if you set it up. So how can they use it differently? It's like saying this beautiful green grass in a park and there's signs saying, do not walk on it. People know how to participate in your environment because you've set it up. But that was a whole different conversation to have with the workers. But anyhow, they almost wheeled these 5 guys into this room with me, because they locked the door on the way out so they wouldn't escape. So these 5 guys and me, and we're talking about finding an opportunity for self-determination and me power and voice. And towards the end of this hour and a half, it's only an hour and a half, I gave them this self-assessment that I use in my own life. And I said to them, look, this is something I do occasionally in my own life to see and to check how I'm going in terms of, the areas that are important to me. And I introduced it to you, and I said, if it's not interesting to you, just bin it. But if it is, then use it. So these 5 guys started to fill this out. Now, this is a little bit different from a normal kind of assessment. One is it's a self-assessment, and I said to them, the most important thing about this is you do not give up your authorship and ownership of this. This is yours, no one else's. And you only tick the things that you want more determination in your life, rather than, this is the other way around. You only tick the things that you don't have the amount of determination in that you want. So the things that you want more determination in. And so they're spending a few minutes, and then Rudy, he puts up his hand, and he goes, Miss, I've only ticked 4. And he was really excited. He's only ticked 4, because this thing had about 32 things on it. He'd only ticked 4 of the areas that he actually wanted to get spectacularly good at. And I said, wow, you seem excited that you've only ticked 4. He said, I thought I was a no-hoper. But I've only found 4 of these things that I don't have determination in. That was news for him. And other people in the group go, I've only ticked 6 and I've only ticked 8. They were all excited. And then I said to Rudy, can I have a bit more of a conversation with you about that, because it might be helpful for all of us? And he said, yeah. And I said to him, is there anything that you want to do with those 4 things? And to this day, I still do not know what they are. And he said, I'd love to get rid of them. I'd love to be able to not have to tick them because I've already got determination over them. He said, but that's not going to happen. And his head was down. He said, that's never going to happen. And I felt this urge in me to kind of convince him that they could happen. Yeah, we could motivate you. And I had to slap myself down a bit and say, not your role, Helen. And I said to him, wow, to get to the place that nothing can change about these 4 ticks, you must have tried lots and lots and lots and lots of things to get to that point. And his head went up, and he said, yeah, I have. I have tried lots and lots of things. So this sense of, even though some of those things, hadn't got him what he wanted, he had been active in trying them. And his chest started to come up a bit. And then I said to him, are those things that you've done by yourself, or are those things that you've asked other people to help you with? And his head went down again. He said, no, miss, they're shame business. He was an Aboriginal man. He said, they're shame business. They're mine. And I said to him, can you help me understand something? I met you 5 years ago, Rudy, when you came to this service, and I imagine you've been coming quite often. And I'm wondering, have you ever thought about asking the people in this service to help you get spectacularly good at getting around those 4 areas? And he said to me, I didn't know that they'd be, that's what they do. I said, well, it might be something for you to think about, whether this is an organisation that might be able to help you. I thought at that stage, he thought that he only comes there to play pool and drink Coke. Anyhow, the next day, I had a workshop with the workers in this organisation. And in comes Bruce, and he goes, what's this test you gave people to do yesterday? And I said, I don't know, we did a few things, I don't know what you're talking. He said, well, Rudy came to see me after he'd been with you. And he knocked on my door, and he said to me, would you help me get spectacularly good at taking these 4 ticks off my page, please? And Bruce said, he was suddenly motivated. I had him on my maintenance list. I said, yes, you'll know that not many people hold hope for him. He said, he's suddenly sprung to life. And I said, aren't you lucky? Aren't you lucky that out of all the people in Rudy's life, he's asked you to help him get spectacularly good at taking these 4 ticks off his page. But what the hell have you been doing for the last 5 years? And I think this is the bit, is that we're wasting 5 years of Rudy's life and everyone else's life when we're not really specific and clear about what our work is to do. What is it there that someone has come into a service and said, help me to get spectacularly good so I can get out of your service to live a life? We invite them to come in and take up residence. So the organisations that are able to stretch themselves do not abandon people, but stretch beyond what they're funded to do in terms of the way that they're funded to do it, to be spectacularly good themselves. There's a leadership team that will know itself through this conversation, but I met with them and I asked them a question around what is it that our conversations should focus on. And there was silence and contemplation for a while. And then someone in this group said, I think we're very good at talking about what we do in people's lives and advertising that on our brochures. But I would like to have a conversation as a leadership team about who we are in people's lives. And until we have that conversation, we don't know whether we're positioning ourselves in the life-defeating space or the life-transformational space. So I want to share with you a couple of stories that might it's some of the things that I've been kind of interested around this stretch. This is a diagram that's cut down a bit, and I'm not going to go through it. It might just help us to have stories about it. But one of the things is that we're invited by our funding programs into this dominant practice over here. So some of these practices that you'll see, you'll probably be familiar with. This stretching diagram is about how do we do the both and? How do we stretch beyond just limiting our practice here, but stretching into also holding a space that connects to supporting people to live well, supporting people to master and overcome. To do that is not easy. And we'll come back to some of the challenges in a bit. But it's about having the intention of not stopping too short, about not saying close enough is good enough, but about stretching from safety net into trampoline. Now, some people go, oh no, we can't do anything. We let it go. That's abandonment. This is about stretching ourselves to hold both. Now, there are some days, and for me too, I will move into this space and I'm more conscious of this space. And my focus is here. And on other days, when I'm tired and when it's easier, it goes back to this space. This is not a static stuff that we kind of, we get it right all the time. It's about the fluidity of our stretch between these two spaces. I'm less impressed by workers that say, oh, we've been doing this for 20 years. It tells me that they haven't. Because they're not talking about the movement and the resistance that it takes to hold this space. I am very impressed by workers that say, and systems that say, oh my God, we just got pulled over to this side, we got sucked into the managed care space, but we got ourselves out of it. It's about noticing what we're resisting. It's like if we do not know that we've got to actually hold this resistance, it's like insects to a flame. We'll just get sucked into it. It's about noticing that pull. It's stronger. This will pull me much more. I've got to be able to build up as a worker, as a person accessing service, as an organisation, my ability to come back this way. You'll notice that some of the things on this left-hand side are probably things that we hold dear and proud, like consumer participation and individual recovery plans. Responsibility for people. Parent-child relationships. If our system's built about parent-child, it's over here. Us and them environments. If you've got to go through Get Smart, 6 locked doors to see a person. If we have different toilets. If our environments tell us about, keep out, it's over this side. If we have a service agenda, If we're about fixing Billy, Freddie, Mary, we're over this side. But if we stretch and say, yes, that's my starting point, but I stretch so that to take on adult relationships over here, and that's very hard when we've got a system set up to do parent-child. When I see that it's not about changing Billy and Freddie, but changing the environments that I create so that Billy and Freddie can actually use them to thrive. This is hard work. So, like Anne was saying yesterday, this is a yes and, not an either or. And I think we're very good at going, oh, we don't do transport anymore. We don't do that anymore. That's abandonment. How can we support someone with yes, and how can I support you to get better at that? So this is the stretch. How do we stretch? I want to share a story with you about an organisation that's a clinical service in this country, and probably something that is pushing me and stretching me as well. As an organisation, they have asked themselves the question, how can we create and foster opportunities for people to live more resourced, more powerful, more control, over their sense of vulnerability as a result of being in our service? That's their main caveat about asking all their services. Every program that they want to deliver is off this centrepiece. And one of the things that they did around this was take on the principle, nothing about us without us. It's a universal principle. And the story that comes to that is that I'd been working with this clinical team for some years, and the executive team had asked me for a conversation about, Helen, can you help us know where you think the teams are in terms of adopting this stretch and stretching into it. And I said, the organisation, all these good workers there doing some very good work. I said, but they don't have a framework to hang it off. And I'd shown them, and they looked at me a bit blankly, this executive team, and I said, I showed them some framework that another organisation had done, and they'd written these beautiful 12 practice principles that this organisation used every day in their practice to test and to reflect and test their practice against, to make sure that they were holding this tension. And one of the principles that this other organisation had written is about, we're of a service that upholds the principle of nothing about you without you. So therefore, we will resist having conversations without your presence. So the executive director and the clinical director looked at this list and said, oh my God, if we asked our staff to do this, we'd have the union here, there'd be mass walkout, there'd be chaos. We can't do it. Then I held that space a bit longer for them. And the clinical director said, but let's choose one off this list. Let's start and let's do it spectacularly well and see what happens. Heifetz would call that an experiment. And the one that they chose was the hardest one on the list. It was this one. And I'm going, they're getting all excited, this executive, wow, we could make our service, embrace this principle. I'm going, whoa, hang on. You could actually risk someone's life because the workers won't know how to hold this space. What I suggest you do is go and talk to your middle management on Monday and invite them into helping you be able to exercise and activate this principle. So I get this email Monday night from one of the execs, and they said, well, we got our middle management together and we said to them, we'd like you to help us to hold this principle in our service about upholding nothing about you without you in everything that we do. This is the clinical service. And they said there was stunned silence for 5 minutes. No one said a word. And then some of the middle managers started to say, oh, but you can't mean every time we have a case review, every time we document something, every time we make a phone call, every time we have a tea room gossip about someone, every time we do a review, you can't mean those times. And the executive held the space. And they said, yes, they're exactly the things that we're going to ask you to do. And then, how can we do it? We'll have people lined up outside our offices for days waiting to see us. We'll be hamstrung. It'll grind to a halt. We won't be able to do our work. Our systems won't work for that. And they said to the middle managers, we'd like you to go back and talk with your teams about this. This will ask us and require us to think differently. We will have to give up some of the ways that we've got used to working because they're no longer serving people. Now, given the due and the journey that this organisation had been on already, they were up for it. And they went back, 17 different teams, they went back, and each of those teams have come up with different ways of embracing this principle. The principle is standard. How it's activated in the service looks very different depending on the team. One of the ones that's very exciting is that they are in the inpatient unit on a daily basis now. Instead of having, handover in the unit, the handover has to be with the person. They're the expert. They're the team leader of the team. So they meet with the person, and the morning staff and the afternoon staff come together like a triad, 3 people, so that the person can negotiate what is it that they need from the staff that particular shift to help them get spectacularly good at something. They joint document. This is a clinical service. So when an NGO says to me, oh no, we can't do it, it's my trump card, and I go, listen to this. So it's about what are we prepared to give up in order to create a different way, because we cannot do risk management and supporting a person to master vulnerability and risk-taking behaviour simultaneously. One will give way to the other. And if our power and our pull is this way, what's going to give up is an opportunity for me to get spectacularly good at something. And once again, we create the modern institutionalisation that is happening. And there's a whole lot of other stories that I could share around this, but one of the things I think I appreciate is that the services that are stretching into this space are letting go of being the centre stage of people's lives. That they're seeing that they play a role, but are not the centre role. That the person is the centre, and PIR is perfectly set up to support a person to take on the team leadership of their own team, not to be on the bench while their team's out there playing for them. That asks us to fundamentally shift how we invite someone to be a team leader, to exercise that. So this is brave, and it's not a quick fix, and it's a challenging one, and it's one that we, if we're going to create new ways, it's not just rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. It's not about the before and after photo. We have to fundamentally reposition ourselves about why are we in people's lives. And I believe we don't need policy to give us permission for this. We need heart. Thank you.
It's obviously us who should be saying thank you, and I take it from your applause that you appreciate Helen's presentation. She certainly puts the challenge out there, doesn't she?